Every once in a while, you're going to come across some people who have extremely bad takes on the media. You'll find them in various places, and nowadays you'll find them in various political sides. It seems that no political side is safe from that one moron who has a really bad take on entertainment. But it seems that the woke infestation has a very distorted view on entertainment. Well, if you can even call how they view it entertainment in the first place. As far as the woke's concerned, they're constantly making propaganda with all these immense double standards. Which is all the more reason why we need to delve into entertainment in context and to defend what is actually good in it. So the reason I bring that up is because of this recent Snow White live-action remake, and specifically about how Rachel Zegler and others have had these misconceptions about the original Snow White movie. I thought I'd make this video just to address these critiques to the top of my memory. So, let's not delay, let's go further in. So, to start off with, Rachel Zegler says that throughout the movie, Snow White meets a prince who, according to her, literally stalks her throughout the movie. Weird. Now, that phrase presupposes that the prince was always lurking in the backdrop the entire time, and yet we have no evidence for that. We have no evidence of the prince peeping in, perving on Snow White here and there. We've got no evidence for that. And actually, if you actually do your research, Walt Disney intended to flesh out the prince's character. I should also note that Walt Disney also intended to have another scene set years beforehand where Snow White and the prince met as children in a very innocent kind of love, and then they met in the way that we saw them in the movie. I suppose with that context, people could make the presupposition that maybe they've met before, but either way, the tale as presented in the 1937 movie is a rather simple tale about innocence versus vanity, whereas the new Snow White remake, which is getting critically panned and scolded, that movie seems to be all about this weird communist propaganda which doesn't really mesh well with this feudalistic setting. Side note, I've noticed people of recent generations seem to be confusing feudalism with communism because they keep thinking, the farmers contributed to the stuff, therefore it must, medieval times must have been communism, right? Wrong. Feudalism still involves lords and kings and queens and so forth in order to rule over all these people. The comparison doesn't really work that well. That kind of communist interpretation leads to a lot of contradictions in regards to the system of the kingdom itself in the recent Snow White movie, in the fact that, everyone's equal, but Snow White and her royal family get to be these rich elites who have the most amount of wealth and comfort. This is what happens when you introduce that kind of politics in. You have these double standards that you can't possibly meet. You have to research everything in context. But going back to Snow White and the Prince, there was a plan to have the prince's character be developed, especially with a deleted scene in which the prince was locked up in the dungeon and then finds a way to escape. Oddly enough, that scene is in the new Snow White movie, albeit with a new thief character and the huntsman, which begs the question, surely Rachel Zegler would have been aware of this if this plot thread was repeated, was made in this new version, right? So another misconception about the original Snow White is that, the prince saves her, and she's not going to be saved. The prince, she doesn't need no man. And basically, the way it's framed is that they presume that Snow White is a completely helpless, petty person, but that's not true. You see, think about it. Why would the prince go out of his way to bring true love's kiss to her to bring her back to life? And why do you think the dwarves go out of their way to protect Snow White? Why? Because throughout the movie, Snow White proves herself to be absolutely strong in her courteous nature. Not to mention, she shows her leadership skills in a variety of powerful ways. The way she insists on tidying up the house, the way she insists that the dwarves have to wash their hands before eating their food for hygienic purposes. The original Snow White had her sense of sass, had her sense of humor, had her sense of courteousness, and that courteousness made her such a welcoming person. Even the animals were willing to approach her. I think it's rather telling that her courteous nature is so powerful and so strong that anyone can see the innocence in her, which plays a crucial role in the story. In the original Snow White movie, there's a scene where Snow White's going out to pick flowers and the huntsman's guiding her, accompanying her. And of course, this is where the huntsman attempts to kill her. But in the original version, Snow White finds a baby bird and goes out of her way to find the baby bird's mum. She didn't have to do that, but she did it anyway. And she wasn't aware that the huntsman was going to kill her off. But the huntsman sees this act of kindness and he's raising the dagger to kill Snow White, but he can't do it. He can't. Because she's too innocent. It'd be like killing a mockingjay. Like, what is there worth killing there? In the remake, I don't recall anything like that. She's picking her apples and Rachel puts on a pretty face, then the huntsman changes his mind. If I remember correctly, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. And there's something else that's particularly odd. Oh my days, sorry, there was a pigeon there. I mentioned in my review that I found it very odd about the manner in which Rachel Zegler's Snow White approaches the cottage. She just immediately barges in, does not question the small beds with the quirky names, and goes immediately to sleep. And throughout the movie, she seems to just demand the accommodation while she's mainly just being there. Kind of like it sounds like something the Evil Queen would do. But in the original, Snow White enters the cottage and then has a courteous, thoughtful idea. I'll tidy up with the animal's assistance and maybe they'll let me stay in return. That makes more sense instead of just rudely barging in. You know, you gotta do a favor of some kind. And so when she goes to the bed, she realizes, oh, these beds are small. Who do these belong to? She's clearly seen as more observant and more considerate about the people being accommodated. I mean, think about it. Imagine if, like, Rachel Zegler just barged into your house and then just immediately slept in your bed. You'd immediately think, excuse me, what are you doing? But if the original Snow White came to your house and asked, oh, can I tidy up and you could let me stay for the night, you'd be more welcoming of the original Snow White, wouldn't you? Come on. Be honest. I've also noticed that the new Snow White movie is very confused as to how it portrays the topic of beauty, because everyone found it laughably stupid that an evil queen portrayed by Gal Gadot would be jealous of Snow White portrayed by Rachel Zegler. It's like comparing a 10 to an 8, if you get what I mean. The movie attempts to spin this around by saying, oh, the magic mirror meant inner beauty the whole time, but that leads to another question. Like, the evil queen in the movie is obviously a villainous evil witch. How on earth could she be fair by inward standards? One comment said, oh, well, the magic mirror... I remember one comment saying, oh, the evil queen asked one question, but then the magic mirror gave a different answer so that the evil queen would perceive it wrong, but the magic mirror meant it in some other way. But either way, the film never presents that to us clearly enough. And there was no foreshadowing of that, and the whole message of beauty just comes across as confused, whereas the original tale is just more straightforward and to the point. Another misconception about the fairy tale is the fact that, I can't believe I'm bringing this up, the modern woke corporation are terrified of representing dwarves for some reason. Modern woke corporations have become so scared of offending anyone and everyone all the time that they will go out of their way to do these ridiculous stuff just to appease to some groups of people, even if it means contradicting the narratives that they're trying to present in the movies and TV shows that they present and video games. They're afraid of presenting stereotypes, even though a lot of people actually don't mind stereotypes. A lot of people actually see stereotypes as a means of celebrating their respective cultures. But modern woke corporations don't realize this. They're just so caught up in this political pandering of superficial diversity and superficial representation that they have all these double standards, as well as this absolute disdain for tradition and the sense of responsibility that brings. But going back to the dwarves for a moment, mythologically speaking, dwarves have been seen as highly valuable because dwarves are small and sturdy enough to work through the mines. That's why dwarves are constantly associated with the mines. That's why Tolkien kept up that tradition of depiction of dwarves with his Middle-earth stories in regards to affiliating dwarves with mines. So that's a positive representation. So contrary to what Peter Dinklage would have to say, firstly, dwarves do not live in caves. These dwarves from Snow White certainly don't live in caves. They live in a cottage. And secondly, dwarves being in mines is highly reliable. Like, I'm a tall person. I would be very grateful for small people to reach places I couldn't quite fit through. I like to give credit to MJ Turner for the majority of what I'm talking about, especially this next part. This misconception of true love's kiss and the fact that people say, "Oh, true love's kiss, it was not consensual, she was unconscious." Well, the prince, he didn't know that kissing Snow White would bring her back to life.
True Love's kiss scene. People argue that this is assault because she didn't consent to it, since she's unconscious. But I argue that's a bad faith reading of the scene. After she went missing, he went looking for her, and when he finally finds her, he thinks that she's dead, so he mourns her. The kiss itself clearly isn't a passionate one. There's no lust or even romance behind it. It's just a kiss goodbye, and he quickly moves on to grieving her. He was unaware that this is how the curse is broken.
It seemed more like a kiss out of respect, and then he went on to mourning her. And then she woke up, and then the prince was surprised. And besides, Snow White was pleased to see the prince. The fact that it's called True Love's Kiss, that implies consent to the person you love deepest in your heart. Another misconception. Oh, the original's too scary. Well, sometimes children need to go through scary stuff so that the happy ending is all the brighter. That's the approach of storytelling that Don Bluth made, and he was a former Disney animator, by the way. And certainly that's a kind of storytelling technique that dates all the way back to the Brothers Grimm themselves. Not that the Brothers Grimm always had happy endings in their fairy tales, mind you. Honestly, if you want a better version of what the 2025 Snow White movie was attempting to do, just go watch Snow White and the Huntsman instead. That's a subversive Snow White done right. And that's saying a lot, given how the lead actress of that movie is the woman from Twilight. Good grief. The woman from Twilight is able to make a better Snow White movie than Rachel Zegler. Just let that sink in.